Welcome to the 23rd DEM I Wonder webinar. DEM has so many services, offerings, programs, and hidden gems that we want to share with all of you. So we're excited to take just a few minutes each week to highlight these features in our weekly webinar. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many exercises have been postponed or canceled. The Utah Division of Emergency Management is hosting this weekly webinar series aimed at providing local emergency managers with relevant content and opportunities to enhance their capabilities. Webinars are live for Q&A and are recorded for later viewing on the DEM website and YouTube channel. Most of these webinars are seminars or workshops with a hands-on portion which will allow emergency managers to become oriented to a DEM process or test a DEM product. Our schedule today will be as follows. We'll start with our ground rules and etiquette. Next, we'll have a brief presentation by Kathy Holder and Max Johnson on I wonder why an emergency manager needs to care about building codes and planning. In other words, show me the money. Following the presentation, there will be a hands-on portion where participants will be encouraged to test out the product or process that was presented. Following the hands-on portion of our program, the presenter will be available for a Q&A session. Following the Q&A, we will close with a short message about upcoming webinars. The ground rules today are fairly simple. Please mute your line while the presenter is presenting. If you have a question, you may type it in the group chat or unmute at the appropriate time to ask your question. This session is being recorded and will be available on our website for future viewing. Thank you all for your attendance today, and with that, we'll turn the time over to Kathy and Max.
Well, good morning, afternoon-ish time frame. Max and I are really excited to be here with you, and I'm going to start sharing my screen here, and hopefully I'm going to share the right one. There we go. We looking good, guys? All right, great. So I am Kathy Holder. I'm the State Hazard Mitigation Officer, and I'm working with Max, and he's going to do a little bit more introduction later when he starts presenting. But yeah, I like the idea of show me the money, and the reason I do is that everything about building codes ends up helping you as an emergency manager with the bottom line. And so knowing how to use those building codes is a very important fact, and who those partnerships are that you're going to work with on that. So I'm going to talk about the building code section. I'm going to try really hard not to put you to sleep, and then Max is going to talk about the more exciting stuff. So fun fact, May is Building Safety Month, and that plays right into what we are talking about today. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention, and also draw your attention to the International Code Council's website. So we're going to give you the links and Tracy can share all our presentation links with you after that, so that you'll know where to go for all these things that we're talking about today. Everything I talk about is going to be very high level, just a bare minimum, and you're going to have to go out and do some research to make sure that you know the rest of the story. So that being said, go check out this website on building codes and how they save. So what I want to start with is where to find your regulations, and hopefully most of you know this, but sometimes I found that you don't know all the places. So I just want to talk about this a little bit. So of course, there's your community ordinance that you can go to, and whether that be your community ordinance for your land hazards or for your floodplain management or many other things that may be in that ordinance, one place that you really need to make sure that you're understanding is on those community ordinances of what you need to be doing as it comes to your job as an emergency manager, or as how you have to pull in those building codes as an emergency manager. Some of the state standards we have, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And because we have the international building codes, international residential codes, and those all link into the ASCE 24 and 7. And then we have our federal code of regulations. So we have The example I have up here is the 4400 CFR. And I do have this link that you can go and look at that code. You don't have to buy it. In fact, I'm going to grab my example here real quick. That I do have my code of regulations, and I like to mark it up. This is a newer one, so it's not as marked up as my older one. And just so you know, yep, I'm pretty nerdy. I also have the other ASCEs as well that I like to research because it really does make a difference. So just as another plug for Safety Month, Building Safety Month, this week's theme is to prevent, prepare, protect with building codes, because building codes save. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But also, I just wanted to give you, what does Utah have right now? And this website that we have here, you can get free codes for all of this as well. So we're not going to leave you hanging. You've got a place to go look for what you need to research later after this presentation. Also, we have, and this is not putting out all the executive orders or Utah legislation that we have in place by any means. You know, as an emergency manager, there's a lot that backs you up, but this is just a few examples of some things that are out there that you probably know about, but maybe you didn't know about. Like for an example, did you know in 1978 that the governor put an executive order in making sure that Utahns follow the NFIP? Well, he did, and it's never been taken off the books. So that might be something you want to go take a look at. Also, here's a general reference to emergency management and some things that you probably already know, but if you don't, go take a look. Recently, I would hope that you all know about House Bill 96. And it played some key roles in emergency management that will be talked about more later, but also just know that it made it all state development. So anything the state's developing in the floodplain, they have to follow the NFIP codes at the minimum. And also that big piece for every community has to have an emergency manager. And we have a link so that you can go check out the legislation for that, because we can't get into too much because we're moving on with our subject matter. And another piece of information that I think could be very, very helpful to you as an emergency manager, if you have not looked at this yet, I have the link here for that too. You can go download this entire document of building codes saved. And it really is helpful when we're looking at disasters, how much flood, wind, and seismic can help us here in Utah. And as we have realized this, well, we've realized it before, but as we've dealt with this last year, we've had a presidentially declared disaster wind event, a seismic event, and we've had several. And the thing that we get declared the most in the past is floods. We didn't have a flood event this last year. We had COVID instead, just for fun. But we do, have a lot of things that we could work on with our building codes in emergency management. So as I talked about, show me the money. Look at this slide. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want you to look at the slide and look at all these programs. And there are many programs in mitigation and recovery. And I believe Jana did something about this on a previous I Wonder webinar. But know, with all of these different programs, with a greater amount of them, there is money to be had and money to be saved and things that you can get with mitigation monies if you are following your building codes. And in some cases, you actually have to make sure you follow the building codes, or you will not get the monies that are involved in these. So where does this come into play? Not going to read this whole big thing. I'm just referencing it so you can go look it up. But as a condition of receipt of any disaster assistance under the Stafford Act, you have to follow the applicable codes and specifications and standards. You also, if you look down there, Executive Order 11988, that's floodplain, and Executive Order 12699, seismic safety, or John's program that he runs here at the state. You have to follow those regulations. And big surprise or not big surprise when you are doing your mitigation or when you have PA funds that you are getting for your community. You have to follow whatever the latest building codes are, not just what our state's latest building codes are, but whatever the national latest building codes are. So something that if you didn't know that you want to plan for. Also, another piece that I just want to make a quick mention about that was on that earlier list is the DRRA 1206 that was brought about in 2018. And in this, it's an amendment to the Stafford Act that actually talks about those building codes. And it also helps you in that to get monies for making sure that you follow those building codes as you repair and as you do things during a disaster. It helps you. It can even get you monies that you could hire a contractor to bring in people to help you with your substantial damage, to help you with your building code and or your building inspections. So this is a piece, if you don't know about it, you want to make sure you read about it. So things to think about and plan for, which I'm going to let Max go in a lot more about the planning side, is to think about with all these programs, if you have public assistance, IA, I'm not sure how it affects the SBA, didn't get a chance to look at that, but I think it may have some implications, or even with your mitigation planning and all of those things, making sure that you guys know about bringing your post-disaster buildings and that you have to use the codes to repair to be in compliance and to get those monies. So it's an important fact. And like I said, we've got all sorts of links that you can follow in here to go get the information and do your research and do your work. We wanted to make sure there was so much with this. We wanted to make sure, since it's such a high level, that you had places to go and look. One really important piece that I want you to remember, because this is coming about pretty quick, if you're looking at putting in that notice of interest, the NOI for BRIC, which we will put a plug in for at the end of this presentation with our activity, it requires looking at your building codes. And you know what? If you want to be the one that beats everybody out on that $50 million possibility of a grant, this is a great place that you can have a little extra edge. If your community has higher codes, if you have a good B6 rating and you put that in on your BRIC grant, that actually gives you extra points, showing you the money that building codes and doing great things with building codes leads to the money for your community. So I'm going to wrap up by asking you a question before we head over to Max. What FEMA programs refer back to building codes to help you get the best mitigation and disaster funding opportunities? Oh, Tracy's launching the poll.
And you should have access to vote in the poll now. If you're not able to see the poll, if you click on the triangle, square, and circle in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you should be able to see a link to the polls. We've got 10 votes. Do you want to go ahead, Kathy? Do you want me to show the results?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So now you should all be able to see the results of the poll. So the options were Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, Hazard Mitigation Post-Fire Grant Program, Flood Mitigation Assistance Grant Program, Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant Program, Building Resilient Infrastructure with Communities Program, or all of the above. And I'll let you reveal the answer, Kathy.
Right. Okay, so we're back to this slide. So if you picked all of the above, you would be right, and a bit more. So just look at all of these programs. Anything that is not highlighted in the orange, you probably better be looking at a possibility of building codes. So just think about that. And on the others, I didn't have time to research out to make sure whether they had it. So thinking about that, they all referred back to building codes and needing to make sure you do the best and greatest that you can with that. So I'm going to turn this over to Max now. And Max, you tell me when to advance the slides.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Awesome presentation. I sure appreciate that information and how to follow the money, right? I'm going to give you a little more background on me. You guys all know Kat, but I just started this year. So I received a bachelor's degree in urban planning. So that's my foundation, is in the planning field, and a master's in public administration. I've earned my certification. I'm certified in a lot of things, but some of them are not appropriate for this presentation. But the American Institute of Certified Planners is the professional planning organization that American Planning Association subscribes to. And then I've been a professional development officer with the executive committee of the American Planning Association, the Utah chapter. For about 12 years, I was on that committee. Back a few years back, when I was at Salt Lake County, I was part of an ESF 14. At the time, the ESF 14 was a utilities category, if I remember right. But for about 8 to 10 years, I attended quarterly meetings at the EOC, lots of conferences and workshops, etc., trainings, the ICS training program. So that's where I got a background in emergency management. And then I was planning manager, the section manager at Salt Lake County for over 10 years. So I have a lot of extensive experience in due process, making sure the public is notified of public meetings. You know, you'll be surprised how many changes to zoning ordinances or general plan amendments have to be re-noticed and cause a delay in that process because they weren't noticed properly, to make sure the public has an opportunity to provide comment to those changes. Lots of customer service experience dealing with code enforcement issues, building permit issues, folks building without permits, that sort of thing. So try to help resolve those issues the best that I can. And so that's why I'm here today, is to try to help come from a different perspective and instill some of my skills and knowledge towards you in the hopes of making your job a little more informed as well. Thank you, Kat. Next, please. So let's talk a little bit about what zoning is. You know, basically it's how property can be used and how property can't be used. It came out of, it was established back in about a little more than 100 years ago in California and in New York. A couple years later, I think 1916 in New York, there were a lot of tenements built in New York, and a major issue they were having back there, besides the normal, what you would think would be the overcrowding issue, what comes out of that would be a lot of sanitary issues dealing with sewer systems and whatnot, and the lack of a sewer system. So with that was zoning was born in its infancy back in those days. I know, if you recall what the New York skyline looks like, a lot of step back buildings as they go up, they get narrower, and that's because of zoning to make sure that we allowed a certain amount of sunlight into the city, and that's the birth of that type of building construction came from. So it was created for the purposes of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public, both present and future, and some ancillary benefits there: value and enjoyment of properties, and to allow property to be appropriately located near surrounding uses or complementary uses. Also ensured appropriate development with the entire community, including natural hazards, to make sure folks weren't building on top of stream banks or on faults, that sort of thing. And also a level of predictability, right? Someone, a potential future landowner is doing their due diligence and investigating at the zoning counter what they can do with a certain property. They want a predictability of what their options are. And if they want something different, what kind of avenues they have available to them to try something different. So, and as Kathy mentioned, building codes and zoning codes save lives and they save money in numerous ways. And approved mitigation plans consistent with local zoning also have a better chance of getting funded, right? If you're coordinating with your building and zoning folks when things are normal conditions and there's no disasters, that's only going to help you when the opportunities arise where you need assistance. Next, please. So an integral component of the public process are stakeholders and partners, right? Stakeholders have an institutional knowledge that is unmatched. You can tap into a wealth of experience and knowledge by talking to stakeholders and gaining a group of stakeholders around a certain topic, a central topic, updating your zoning code, updating your building code, creating a new general plan for the community, doing a text amendment to your ordinances, those sorts of things. And they're critical to the success of the communication needs, resources, and abilities. Both know what you may need to know. So it pays to have a robust list of stakeholders and partners that you can rely on. And they come from different points of view, right? They have different objectives. They have different characteristics that they're more passionate about, maybe than you may currently have in your toolbox. So again, a great opportunity to gather as many of those as possible. And they also contribute more effectively to communication. You learn more when you talk to other folks and you're discussing opportunities and you reach into your toolbox from a conversation you had with the mayor of a certain city a couple weeks ago. That does nothing but enrich your credibility and opportunity to gather more information and get more stakeholders on board. And have a detailed crisis management plan identified. That's another, I've got something in my way here, a little note, but I'll hide it here so I can read the, no, I can't. All right, anyway, I think that gives you a good idea. And then also the other thing I want to say with this slide before we move on is the diversity of where you can find these stakeholders, right? Police officers, the lower corner, left corner is a stakeholder group of a special commission that was formed years ago to study some canyon developments and a new zoning ordinance for the canyons. So it just gives you a lot of options to choose from and a lot of ideas as to where you can explore and where you can expand your sphere of influence. Next. About stakeholders, they have certain attributes. There's users, people that are going to use your product, use your zoning ordinance, use your building codes. Governance, those that want to see how a project is going to be managed. You have influencers that have power. You have providers who have resources, and you have informers. The pictures just show where you can get stakeholders from and when you should start, right? You don't have to wait and start when someone's at the front counter or someone calls you on your cell phone and asks you how come Joe is building 2 feet from the property line. You can start when they're 6 years old, when they're 8 years old, give them a little education along the way, and pretty soon you've developed a well-informed group of partners. Next. Again, partners, they have some attributes as well. They can assess issues within their organization, and they can identify the resources and where they can pitch in and where they can help support. They're also able to determine the roles regarding the big questions, right? Who, what, where, when, and why, and how. And they also have an understanding of the organization's structure, and they have a robust contact list. You should always try to enrich your contact list along the way whenever possible. It'll only help you along the way. Thanks. Next. A little dynamic diagram here showing the planning process on the right side, where you start planning, you move towards a vision or concept. This could just be that it's time to renew your plan, or it could be after an incident that occurred that you want to make some changes to. And you have a strategy or strategies that come out of that visioning process. You're collaborating with all of your stakeholders and all of your partners along the way to help refine the project. After you refine it, it becomes implemented. And guess what? The cycle starts over again. And then you have lessons learned from the last time that you went through this exercise. Or maybe there's a new challenge that has popped up that is forcing the opportunity to revisit this plan or this process again. So there's always something there that is constantly dynamic and fluid in the planning process. And part of that is what happens when you have building code issues pop up, or if you have a disaster like we had this past year. So they all create learning opportunities, right, to help us become more resilient for the next time. Next slide. So they're everywhere, right? I hope if there's one thing that you get from this presentation is that sometimes the opportunity jumps right out there. Other times you have to look for it, but there are literally everywhere where you can gain a new friend, a new support mechanism, or someone that can help you later on down the road. I've never been an emergency manager, but I know how to work with individuals and people to get things accomplished. And the more you know about your subject, and what Kat said is so important with the building codes, that the more you know about the building codes, doesn't have to be, you don't have to have the IBC memorized, right? But just having some knowledge that when you go out on the field and you see a certain element in the field, it'll ring a bell. Wait a minute, is this right? Or are there options? And so they're everywhere. Keep that in mind. And you always want folks that will inform the conversation, but you don't want one viewpoint, right? You want a mixture. You want folks that have contrary viewpoints or differing opinions. You don't just want everyone that's just going to say yes, 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 because you're not using all of the ingredients in the cookie mix, right? When you do that. So you got to put the flour in and the sugar and the chocolate chips if you want chocolate chip cookies.
Max, I like that analogy. And I want, because I know you're going to talk more about this, but I want, as we're going through this, for people to start thinking about these stakeholders and partners, as you talk about this, to start thinking about who those are going to be in reference to building codes. And I know you're going to talk about this more, but I just want them to get their mind thinking and going, because maybe we're going to have to ask them some questions coming up here.
We just might have to, and I think Tracy's grading these questions this time. So
I think so. There's a test, and it's graded.
Okay, well, thanks for jumping in there, Kat. You can go to the next slide now. Oh, wow, what do you know? There's a question. So why is zoning important with respect to emergency management? And I think we have this on a poll, Tracy, is that correct?
That is correct. So it has been launched if everyone wants to locate the poll feature again. And there are a number of options for why is planning and zoning important with respect to emergency management. So I'll go through and read those as we have people voting. First, it defines how property can and cannot be used, promotes and protects the the health, safety, and welfare of the people. It ensures proper development in the community, provides a level of predictability, saves lives and money, enhances opportunities for funding through grant opportunities, or G, all of the above. And we've got 7 votes in so far. Give it just a minute more. So Max, it looks like we had an overwhelming vote for all of the above.
Wow, no one got stumped. That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you, Tracy. And for your efforts, you get a second question back to back. There are at least 5 attributes of a stakeholder. Can you name at least 3 of them? There's probably a whole bunch, but.
And again, that one has been launched. The options are users, governance, influencers, providers, informers, or F, all of the above.
You guys are on top of your game.
Yep. Max, I think we're not challenging him enough, Max. I don't know. maybe it's that hint of all of the above. I'm not sure.
Maybe. Let's see. Okay. Thanks. So this is just an example of a project that I managed for about 10 years at the county. It was called the Cooperative County Plan. I'm just going to briefly go over it because we made a lot of progress and created a lot of new stakeholders and new partners through this process. And it just began with the vision that we invite all the planning directors to the table once in a while to see what we could do if there were issues along property bound or jurisdictional boundaries that could lend help from a regional voice, a collaborative voice, rather than just City A versus City B. And so we started this. It was a quarterly meeting that we held with all the directors, and it ended up getting, I don't know, maybe tenfold in size over the course of its duration. But it'd give partners an opportunity to talk about concerns and issues that they were having that were similar to one another, and also unique issues as well. We had guests come that demonstrated different skills, lots of GIS folks, and lots of collaborative efforts on as far as community plans, general plans go. So it led to many enhancements in mapping and GIS, in regional support, in managing data. TAZ stands for Traffic Analysis Zones. It's a tool transportation planners use to help. Well, that helps do a lot of things, but one of the items they'll do those when they're determining what size of roads they need in a certain area, what kind of volumes they're anticipating, and it helped some of our communities determine what they wanted to do with their land use, how they wanted to develop and classify their land use for future enhancements of their community. Companies and firms had skills, and of course a wide stakeholder net was established. So thank you, Kat. Just a couple points why we should collaborate, right? We help to maintain a state of preparedness. We're in the loop, and we become aware of challenges that communities face at a local level as well as challenges other jurisdictions are facing and what that creates from a regional perspective, how that ties in. One of the things you'll hear me talk a lot about is the interrelatedness of decisions and impacts. And this is a clear reason why we need to collaborate, why you need to have that in your toolbox. I'm sure many of you do. I'm just trying to see if we can help pick up a couple new tools for you. Realize and nurture potential new partnerships, of course, and it refreshes contact information. We do that because it just makes a more robust collection, because I don't know how many times, and I'm sure you're the same way, where you've had a problem come up and gosh, it wasn't 2 weeks ago that you had a meeting where someone with that skill set to help you was presenting and you had their contact information. Maybe you don't, maybe it just leads to contacting other folks, but at least it's a starting point for you. So that's an important aspect, important component. And then it gave everyone in the room opportunities to see how communities would solve their issues and problems that they had. Sometimes you know exactly that you can use the same result, that you can get the same result with the same type of a plan as jurisdiction C did. But then again, sometimes you have to take and create a hybrid, right? Where you create components, what jurisdiction C did and what city B did. And then you have your solution that works for your community. Thanks. Next slide, Kat.
Max, before you move on to the next one, we did have a question in the chat. And
All
the
right.
question is the Cooperative County Planning Group still meeting today? And can state entities present there, or do you need to be invited?
They moved to a different venue when they created the Regional Transportation Department in about 2016, I believe. So a lot of it is ran through one of the partners is Wasatch Front Regional Council's Technical Advisory Committee. And to the best of my knowledge, that is still in effect. I don't know if they do, if it's at the same stature that it was when we were doing it, if they do things a little differently. I mean, they have a whole program of grants that they administer too that came out of this effort. And so I know that that's a big component of what they do. So I don't know exactly what the situation is today on it, but the Wasatch Front Regional Council Technical Advisory Committee is a great place to start. And they have, at my last note, they still had quarterly meetings and they still would take presentations from folks. And a lot of times we had UDOT present, John Thomas from UDOT, others from UDOT, from UTA, from Envision Utah, from Wasatch Front Regional Council. So just a wide net there. So I would check there first.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Max.
Sure. Okay, next slide, or this slide. So we were talking a minute ago about building problems, right? So the slide on the right is, in the upper right, started out with a little bit of a footing. This is a single family dwelling and the home is to the left. And over the years, you could see where the texture of the block has changed. And none of this was done with a building permit, okay? Worked its way up. And then one day, voila, there's an awning that, of course, is a foot from the property line attached to the home, which makes it totally in violation. So you get around to having a disaster. I don't know if they would get mitigation money for a structure that didn't have a building permit for it. So those are some of the issues that we see out in the field. Same on the picture on the bottom left. Again, you're 1 foot from, you can see that structure in the background is just barely away from that retaining wall that's been put up. So, so the point there is that building codes are fluid. They change frequently. it's important to be in the loop, right? Keep an eye on what's changing at the legislature. I'm sure there are contacts in all communities where you can get looped into their the email thread that lists the continuing process of the legislature. That's not the only place that these occur. There's also administrative determinations that each community makes where they feel there's a situation that doesn't exactly fit within their existing zoning ordinance or building codes, but they make an administrative determination and put it in writing so that if someone comes up a couple years later with the same issue, that's how they can resolve that issue rather than having to rewrite the code. A lot of times it's for things that don't exactly fit, like a puzzle piece in the code. So know your building official, inspectors, permit techs, interact with them, find out what's new and exciting. And that can help you when you're out in the field and someone's asking you a question, you'll be able to rely on that information. The bottom section of bullets there just talks about common issues that pop up with folks not building with a permit. A lot of times they have plans approved, but they go ahead and build an extra 2 or 3 feet higher or 2 or 3 feet out the back. And that creates major issues in the field for inspectors. So other times they're just not up to speed on a building code change or a building code requirement. So those are other issues that pop up. Thank you. Next slide. Again, this just shows the importance of partnerships. I won't read all of this. Emergency managers, what you see on the left is what Kathy talked about. That's in the state code. What an emergency manager has to do, right? They shall create a plan to coordinate emergency preparedness, response, mitigation, coordination, and other recovery activities. So, and they have to keep this the emergency manager position succession, and they have to coordinate with other emergency managers and officials for the same elements. So community-wise, I can see, looking at it from the outside, to me, it seems like, I know you guys as emergency managers know more specifically your particular situation, but it seems that some emergency managers have a whole lot of hats. Some have quite a bit of hats, but a lot of them are different, right? They have different hats. And so your time is of the essence. And a lot of times, I'm sure you may get overburdened. So you have to prioritize to manage your priorities. But also, to me, just being here for a few months, it seems like there are different, some communities have you do a whole bunch of tasks, whereas some may focus you in another area as well. Maybe you're doing some business license review, or you're going out on these small business loan applications. So just, I guess what I'm trying to say here is I understand that there's lots of challenges to the position, and the best that you can identify what those challenges are will help you in the future. As you receive additional responsibilities, will help you cope with those responsibilities and do your job in as effectively as I know that you do. Thank you. Next slide. This one is, I'll give you a hint. This one is a question coming up. So this is just, I took a stab at who you could partner with. From an organizational standpoint, if you're in a small city, the recorder's office, assessor's office, the division director, the zoning administrator, okay, all can be very helpful. From a team standpoint, you can being part of a community, you can tap into all these resources, and they all can be very helpful to you given the specific situation or issue that you're trying to resolve. And then also at the bottom is a whole host of related agencies. So think about this slide, what agencies, what divisions you interact with all the time, what ones you do a little bit, and which ones you don't ever go see. And it might help activate your interest in a couple different areas. And then there's more than just what's on this list. Obviously, this is not inclusive. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So can you name at least 3 of those partners from the previous slide that can help your current emergency management support network? It could add value.
And for this, there's not a poll, so you can go ahead and put your answers into the chat.
And as they're putting those answers in the chat, Max, who do you think, if you were to pick your top 2 coming from your side of things, now that you're, looking at the planning and emergency management from the state side, what partners, when looking at building codes, would you think were your top 2 that you would go to in your community? Or, if you don't have them in the community, maybe up to the county if you're a very small community.
Well, most definitely the zoning administrator, the division director, but a lot of times you'll find such a wealth of information with a permit tech or a building inspector, an offsite inspector. The inspectors are in the field, right? Code enforcement officers. So they're seeing things in the real world, and they'll come back with problems, but they'll also come back with potential solutions. So you want to listen to their concerns and create solutions off of that. That way you're getting a rich viewpoint from seeing something on the ground, how it is, how it works with how it's supposed to work based on the ordinance or the building code and the permit that was obtained, and then the concerns that the inspector has and the solutions that they bring. So there's.
So I agree, and I for me, I'm just thinking, your public works, your building inspector, if you have one, your your building official, and being good friends with them so that they know they're up to date on the codes. But maybe you could point out to them, oh, here's our emergency management code, here's our floodplain code. Oh, and wait a minute, when we're doing buildings, if we're not following these rules, or there's an emergency and we're not following these rules, then we're going to miss out on this mitigation money. So start thinking about how you're going to partner that in with, if you want to be able to follow these rules, get the mitigation monies for your project, make sure that you can, whether it's a brick project or public assistance, that you can get those funds, then those partnerships need to be worked out upfront, and figuring out those things now so that they're ready to go for the mitigation grant or for the disaster.
Exactly. Thanks, Kat. Okay. So a couple closing slides. Advanced preparation. How are we doing on time? About 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'd say about 5.
Yep, you've got just a couple minutes left.
Okay. So knowing who creates rules and regulations that you run into all the time is very valuable information. Again, establishing relationships, not only during the disaster, right? But and I'm sure you guys all know this. I know you do. Prior to a disaster and post-disaster, lessons learned. So they're all valuable. And again, I'll say the interrelatedness to the building codes. That you coordinate your projects to accommodate and support building codes so that they speak together when there's an issue. Thank you. Next slide. Just in a nutshell, again, what's in the state law as far as what an emergency manager is responsible for: prepare, create, coordinate, mitigate, and respond. Thank you. So can emergency managers find support, information, and guidance? Yes, right? It's everywhere. Emergency managers should embrace new opportunities. when they arise to enrich your pool, your toolbox, so to speak, of stakeholders and partners. You might find them on the moon, you might find them on Mars, or maybe in a community near you. And next. I think this is the last slide. So in a nutshell, I wonder why an emergency manager needs to care about building codes and planning. Through planning in advance, then, we know the types of buildings and an inventory, what's needed to be safe. We know how many institutional buildings we have, how many assembly uses, how many educational uses. So all that is important. Planning in advance of a disaster, again, post-disaster and during it, you anticipate the actions that you can help create or modify the building codes and the zoning ordinances to prevent those, mitigate against those factors in the future. Having a working knowledge of building codes creates a solid foundation. Again, it anticipates the interrelatedness of decisions. When your neighbor is building an awning that's flowing water into your yard, is that a problem, right? So you have to be concerned with the interrelatedness of decisions, and the foundational elements of community planning helps create a diverse perspective and understanding, and helps round out those decisions so that you have a clearer understanding of the interrelatedness of those decisions. Sorry to keep badgering that phrase, but that's an important one in my world. And having both the planning and building code perspective creates a thorough, informed decision. And it also, you gain some trust from the community. The more you can speak about a variety of issues and why and how, who, what, where, when, why, and how. So with that, I believe that's my presentation and Kat's presentation. I can't thank you enough for letting us spend an hour or so with you today. Thanks.
Oh, well, we do. I guess I went a little fast on that. on the information there, but we're going to go here and we can go back to that slide after the fact for questions and answers. So we do have an activity for you, and Eric Martineau was wonderful in creating something for us so we don't break his brick NOI system. So he created an example. So we're going to give you this link down here after the fact. Don't go there to practice. Please don't do it. That's where you go in and apply for your real brick NOI to start the process for application. So first you have to do a notice of interest so we can, see where you're at with that. And then later there will be more that will happen that you'll need to do for the application. And we are having a brick presentation about what you need to do to apply for brick. And I believe, and I put down that, but I think that was going to be June 3rd, I believe, but that will be sent out by Eric. So just be watching out for that. And just know that the deadline for the NOI submission is May 31st. So there we are coming about on almost, we're up on it. So we have to worry about our building codes and our safety, but we also have to worry about getting our application in. So Eric created this link that I can play with and show you what it looks like, so that when you go in, if you want to put in a notice of interest, so if you've got a project, think about your lifelines, think about projects that you could do for a natural hazard, and think about what could you do if you had $50 million to fix your problems for mitigation, and then say, oh, maybe I need to hurry and put in a notice of interest for something here. So as you're thinking about that, this is what it's going to look like. So you're required to answer questions on here if it has the star by it. You're going to need a point of contact. So I'm going to say Kat here. You are going to have an address. So I'm putting our old state office building because that'll fill that in quick. we'll do my email address so that that we can just move on through this. And know as you go in here, Eric's not leaving you high and dry. He's giving you a place to go for some information. So not only do you have information here, but maybe if and we can send it out after the fact. I forgot to get the link for all the hazard mitigation website information, the hubs that we have up. So we'll try and get that out to you too. I just want you to know that this portion does need information, but it's not terrible. So you have time to pull the rest of it together. So you're going to look through and answer these questions of what it is. Does your community have a mitigation plan? It needs to have one to get the money. What kind of application? Are you wanting a planning application, a mitigation project? We can do scoping. Is it a reapply from the previous year? Do you need building code activities or partnership activities? So there's a lot of things that we could say we want. I'm going to say we want a mitigation project, just so you get a entity. Oh, what's my community? It's DEM. Okay. Let's see. I forgot to put that in. So we go to next. You have to have all the pertinent information there. So I think I want to do something for floods because, you know, floods are near and dear to my heart. And so that's what I'm going to do there. But this is just, I'm just typing in some quick stuff so you can see what you have. You have to look at what your details are. Give us a picture of it. As you're putting in details, give us a picture of what you're doing so that we understand what you're trying to accomplish and what you're doing. What is it going to solve? It has to be able to solve some natural hazard mitigation issue. So put that in there. Where is that project located? Address, latitude, longitude. Give us those GIS coordinates. Make sure we understand where it's at, so we can go check out the area and see if it's making sense. Is it a critical facility? Because if it is, there's extra kudos and extra things you may have to do as well. So think about that. Is the project site located in a floodplain? Oh, yes, we do need to know this. And when you put in your application, you need to put a map of where that location is. And there's extra things that need to happen if it's in a floodplain. So don't forget to do that. I've had people forget about that too. Does your project have the potential to impact environmental resources or historic properties? If it does, you can still do the project, but there are special considerations you have to think about. So, you know, as each of these are going on, we need to get a picture of this. We need to understand what you need. If a structure is involved, if it's 50 years or older and on the National Historic Registry, it may be of historic significance. So we need to look at that. I'm going to say no, because I don't want to do all that work. So do you have project engineering and information already? If you've got a lot of information already, because this is something you've been looking at that your community needs to do, well, that's going to really be helpful. What's your project timeline? There are very specific timelines for the grant, so you need to look at how much time it's going to be and make sure as you're looking at that, these grants come about, the timeline may be quite a bit of time before it is awarded, but you know, so you've got to look at that out, that it may be out a ways before you can start that project as well. So you have to put information in about that. Are there special considerations that might affect your project timeline? In those endangered species, conflicting projects, things that need to get done before you can start that project, those kinds of things. What's your cost share? Remember, this is a 25% for you and a 75% for FEMA. Estimated total cost, you know, mine's going to cost a lot of money. Wait, that's probably too much. It's going to say we can't do it. Okay.
I was just going to say, a lot of this is just preliminary estimates as well. So if you haven't done your full engineering, if you haven't done a complete cost share yet, that's fine. We just need some idea. Is it a $500,000 project or a $5 million project? So
thank you, Jana. And please chime in anywhere. just trying to get you a general idea of what you're coming in to do. And this is your overview. You're going to be able to get whatever details you need before the actual full application goes in. This is just saying we're interested in doing one. So if the project involves long-term maintenance, who's going to be responsible? What are the expected costs? That's all part of what you need to look at when you're doing the full application as well. So that's just information that you need to have a general idea of. But when you put in that plan, or when you put in the application, the final application, you do need to look at that. That is an important piece of information. Is the success of this project dependent on BRIC funding? Do you think if you don't get the BRIC funding, you can get it somewhere else? Yes, no, maybe. You know, I'm going to say maybe. It's possible. So please describe at least 3 alternatives. And this is something that's key. And one of those alternatives could be to do nothing, but you need to think of 3 alternatives that you considered besides the one that you're putting in for. And any other additional comments you have. Like, give us like your story of why this is so important if you can, and that who, what, when, where, why, and that picture really to paint the picture of what you're doing so that we can understand fully what you want to do. And then what do? You could, click submit, and it's not that terrible. I know I went through it quickly because we, are in a limited time frame, but just know it's not that terrible to go in and put this information in. If you think you have a project, if you have something valid you want to do, and it's going to mitigate a risk in the community, look at your lifelines, see what you can combine. You get points for those kinds of things. Go in and put it in, and then you can pull together the rest of it, and you can come to the BRIC meeting to tell you what you have to do for the project and what you have to put in for the application on June 3rd. Were we able to get that in the chat, anyone?
The application?
The date of the meeting, sorry.
Oh, okay. Doesn't look like that's in the chat yet.
Okay.
I put the link to the hub site that contains all of the information about BRIC, and we'll add the link to the upcoming meeting, as well as the links to the NOI, and the applications are all on that site. So that's kind of a one-stop shop that you guys can go to for anything about the upcoming BRIC applications.
Perfect. Thank you. And for those of you that are on the call or listening later to the recording, we'll have this link in the description of the YouTube video. So thank you for that, Jenna.
And I'm going to go back to our contact information. There we are. And I don't mind sticking around for a little bit more if anybody is left that wants to ask any questions. And so here we are, and we're glad that you hung with us.
Yep, thank you.
All right, any questions for Kathy or Max before we close out?
Kathy, this is Darrell with Ogden City. I have a question.
Great, go ahead.
So you were saying we have a building here in Ogden, the Union Station, who desperately needs seismic upgrade. So I asked the individual over the Union Station. The problem we're having is he hasn't had actual bids for that information. Now, a comment was made that you don't have to have exact numbers, but at some point, what timeline do we need those exact numbers? He was thinking he could get them by next year, but it sounds like we won't be able to meet the deadline to get the right amount of the bids in for the project. Any suggestions on that?
I am, Jana's still here, so I'm going to defer to her on that question.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say I can jump in on that.
So,
you need to know the amount you're applying for by the time you submit the application. Part of that, or at least you need to have a good idea, even if it's not exact, because the amount you put in the application is the amount you'll be awarded.
Right.
And so most people don't know the exact cost when they do an application, because they still need to do the final engineering. They still need to do all of that after they get awarded. But you do want to kind of have at least a good idea so that you ask for the right amount of money, because if you put in for like, oh, this is a $1.5 million project, and then by the time it gets awarded, you figured out actually it costs 2.5 million, you're still only going to get that 1.5.
Okay.
So yeah, for the application, we don't have to be like, you need your exact bid from the person who's doing it to the dollar amount, but you do want a good enough idea that you feel comfortable with the amount you're asking for.
Okay, and I may have missed this. When does that application due? I know the NOI is due the 31st, but when is that other application due?
Yeah, so I'm going to double pull up my HMA thing here to double check I have the dates correct in there.
Okay.
But it's the end of July is when we have, let me pull this up so I'm giving you the correct dates for sure.
And I apologize if this information has been posted elsewhere and
Oh no, you're fine. It's a place you can go to look for it, but even I have to
Okay.
look it up to be sure here where we have the dates on this site, or if Eric or Emma are on and can remember
Oh, and
the
I
exact
think
dates. It's I know we have to have a first application in July, I believe, and then there's a second submission that you will do after that, because usually people submit their first application to us, and then there's some questions or changes we have for you to make. And then the second submission you turn into us, but they have to be completely submitted this fall. So
I'm going to share a screen with you really quick again. It has the dates on it.
Okay. Where are you posting this? Are you posting this on your website, some of these slides?
So this I Wonder webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel and also on dem.utah.gov/iwonder. But then there is the hub site, which is the last link in the chat. That's where the information about BRIC is available.
yeah, I don't know if I have can I share my screen really quick, or is that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry to keep everybody on. I don't mean to be.
Oh, you're fine. We're not in a hurry, and others that stay on, I guess, are interested in the same information. So, now I just need to find where I can request to share my. Oh, there we go.
I mean, the Union Station is a historic building, so I know they really we are hoping to get the seismic upgrade done and use this money to apply for. So I'm hoping we can somehow make it work.
Yeah, so this is the hub site. The link is in the chat.
Okay.
And then we're also going to put links to this on DEM's main website as well. So you'll be able to find links to this there. And everything for BRIC will be posted on here. This will kind of be where we're our information location. And this gives you general information about it. And then if you come up to these tabs at the top and click on BRIC, this has the information about BRIC. And then at the bottom, we have the application steps and timeline. So each of those steps has a date associated at the bottom. So your first application submission to us is July 31st. We'll review it, let you know if there's any changes or things you need to do. Then you can submit a second submission by the end of August. We do a state review because we have to review, rank, and score. And then we'll be turning them in late fall. So.
Okay, yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you for the time and showing me around the links. And I'm a little new to this still, and so I'm trying to figure it out, but I appreciate each of you taking time to help.
Glad to help.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Are there any other questions for Kathy or Max or Jana? All right. Well, thank you, Kathy and Max, for your presentation today. As a reminder, this webinar and all other webinars in this series will be available on the DEM website at dem.utah.gov/exercises or now at dem.utah.gov/iwonder. Our webinar next week will be I Wonder, what is the future of the I Wonder webinar series, presented by your host, Tracy Bodley. If you have any I Wonder topic suggestions, please reach out to tbodley@utah.gov to have your topic added to our calendar. We're always excited to help you explore and get to know all that DEM can offer the emergency management community. Until next time, keep wondering.